and I didn't put any sunscreen on my nose, and dude, like it turned into fruit strip leather, just like peeled off. It was brown, and then when I peeled it off, it would be purple underneath. It was so bad. Once I moved to Eastern Time, I have no idea where I'm at.
Yeah, no, you're all good. I just need to make the mental shift. So it's like now that I've made a mistake, like my brain won't miss that again. Like it'll be like, yo, remember homeboy is out on the East Coast.
Yep, and sunburned.
Nice. Dude, you gotta get that vitamin D, bro.
Dude, it's not even that hot. It's like in the mid 60s, and I get out there at 9, and it's still in the... It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter what temperature.
Florida, my son loves it.
Florida coast and like the Texas coast too, man. It is crazy how fast you burn when you get down on the coast. I mean, I'll burn like crazy. If I was walking around outside of my property with no shirt on, I'd get cooked. So, like it just, the place where it really surprises me is Colorado.
Oh, well, yeah, that's because the atmosphere.
Yeah. And you're just, you're at a much higher altitude like that. In Oregon too. Like Oregon, I couldn't believe how fast I'd burn in Oregon. Like,
just this past time?
No. When I lived there, like, not this last time. There was very little skin that was exposed to the sun the last time I was there.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, you could do it if you were on the mountain and it wasn't snowing and you didn't have goggles or a face mask or something like that, for sure.
Yeah, easy.
Yeah, the worst sunburn I ever got was in the summer. We went and climbed Mount Chrysolite in Colorado for Young Life Camp, and I didn't put any sunscreen on my nose, and dude, like it turned into fruit strip leather, just like peeled off. It was brown, and then when I peeled it off, it would be purple underneath. It was so bad.
My worst was Surfside or Galveston, Texas, when I was probably either late elementary school. Or no, I was elementary school. It was definitely elementary school. It was so bad that like, blistered and I got bubbles and they were popping and oh man, that was the absolute worst. Yeah. I did not make that mistake a second time, at least not to that degree.
Yeah. 2008, I went and did door-to-door sales in Bakersfield, California, which is just about the hottest place in the United States outside of Phoenix and Death Valley. And we were knocking in the middle of the summer, and we had the weekend off, and this kid, because we were kids then, he goes out to the pool. He hadn't had sun all year. It must have been like the first or second weekend, actually. And he just sat out there for a couple hours and got so burned that his shoulders turned into, I'm not even kidding, like 2-inch tall bubbles that were probably the width, like went from his shoulder to his neck. So he had these bubbles that probably were like, I don't know, 10 square inches or something like that. And then just like giant. It was the nastiest thing I've ever seen in my life. It looked like somebody had just taken in a magnifying glass and focused the rays of the sun on his shoulder and decided to torture him. I just wanted to pop him. I was like, oh, can I please pop that bubble?
Oh, my wife wouldn't even have asked. She just would have walked up and did it. And yeah, that'd have been me. That's what she would have done.
All right. Well, it's been a week, huh?
It has been, dude.
And it's only Tuesday.
I know. There's so much going on. It's all awesome stuff. I wish that there was more time to be in each of the different things that are taking place, which inevitably, I think there is enough time, but it's just such good learning at every level, individually and as well as just for the company. So yeah, man, trying to be present to it. Like that's, I think, one of the biggest shifts that I've made over the last, year. I wish I could say it sooner, but just like an absolute awareness of like, in order to master things, like, you're going to deal with things being very mundane at times. And it's just critical to fall in love with like the process, like the actual process of what's going on and not looking past that. And it's so easy to look past it, not just like in business, but like just every category of life. But that's something that like I'm very much like I'm thinking about it a lot. I'm writing about it. Like I'm in prayer about it. Like, every morning when I'm in my quiet time, it's something that I'm reminding myself, and I'm asking for wisdom and guidance as it relates to just staying staying in that, like that seat of just being infatuated with like the process and like not, you know, obviously we're working for results and like, you know, but it's like, I've just really truly believe and have come to understand that like the more you focus there, just like those results come, but the more committed you are to doing the process, like brick by brick correctly and making sure the right people are involved and getting out of the way when needed to let those people do things, like that's it. That's where it's at.
Yeah, it's a soup, right? And you're just adding all the ingredients, and you know the result of a soup at the end is something that you get to eat, but you got to spend a lot of time. Maybe it's not even a soup. Maybe it's like a stew. It's got to sit there, and let's not even use an Instapot. Let's go with an old school pressure cooker.
Gotta be old school.
Or not pressure cooker.
Or is it crock pot?
Crock pot.
Yeah.
There we go. And so, man, that stuff's got to sit there for hours before you can enjoy it. And I think this is actually a really good example. Like, the thing about food is you can have a really good meal. You can enjoy the heck out of it, but you're going to get hungry later. You're going to have to do the thing all over again. So I think an appetite is a really good way of understanding like the enjoyment. It's like the preparation, knowing what the end result's going to be and not expecting it to fill you for the rest of your life. Because I was listening to Chris Williamson talk about this, and he's like, I think his stuff is Modern Stoic or Modern Wisdom. And he was talking about how a lot of people, like if you were to ask a person who achieves some level of success, you know, hey, when you got to this point in your life, you used to say, oh, when I get here, I'll be happy. And then on the other side of it, now you're not happy. What happened? And if you don't enjoy the process, then the result alone isn't going to be anything that delivers any amount of happiness. I mean, you might get a tinge of happiness, but then after that, you're just like, okay, on to the next thing. So yeah, I guess with the food example, like if you're enjoying the whole creation and then you get to eat and then you know you're going to get to do it again, it's never expecting that the meal is going to fill you up. It's just like the process is what helps. And then, you know, for a time it'll sustain you.
Well, how much better is the food going to be if the cook absolutely loves the process? Like is into it, like is like, I mean, every single thing that they're putting into that, like they're measuring it, they're making sure that they're putting the right amounts, like they're tasting it, they're checking it along the way, like they're doing all the things to make sure that when they do get to that point, you know, it is what they want it to be. But they love every aspect leading up to that moment. Because I mean, and for some of them, I mean, it's like the food, you know, eating of the food is, I don't know, maybe it's not even as gratifying. Like, you know, it's that build process. I mean, why do so many, you know, people who build homes, you know, like I think, you know, they love the build process. They want to build. They love to build and see something created. And then it's like, bam, like, all right, I want to do it again. Let me do it again.
Yeah, totally. That's why, like, I will never retire. I know that. Even at some point when I'm old enough to retire, maybe I'm not doing this, I'll be doing something else. It's like that building process. And that's what's great about being down here in Florida. A lot of people think I came down here to vacation. It's like, no, I'm still working and working just as much, but at least like I'm doing it in an environment where I'm enjoying the process a little bit more because there's sun. I'm getting the vitamin D. I'm outside. I can take calls from the beach as opposed to calls from inside of my office back in Iowa. So, you know, it was just it's a change of scenery just so that I can continue to enjoy the process of building what we're building. It's no less stressful, no less satisfying, or no more satisfying. Oh, wait. It is more satisfying just because I've changed locations, but like it's not like this is the result that I was chasing. It's like, no, this is great. Like I continue to build something and I have this opportunity to do it just in a slightly different circumstances than otherwise.
Well, and what I'd be interested to know too is there a certain level of awareness for you that like you need certain things to also perform at your best? So, you know, you live up in Iowa, like that's where your wife is from. And your in-laws are there, and that obviously is awesome for you as a family for you guys to be up there and be together. But I know from some of my own experiences, and while it may not be similar, and you may not be doing it at all for the same reasons, but I know for me, like I at one point, you know, recognized probably like my mid-30s that like changing up physical space for me made me more productive, especially like when I needed to be like in more creative, like taking new ground type mentality, like kind of like almost going out on the hunt. Like I needed to be it just enlivened me. Like I process things differently and honestly more quickly. And I come up with more ideas at a faster, they just come at a faster rate. And it was just something that I noticed. And so I don't do it I'm in a season of life where I can't really engineer it the same way I did in my mid 30s. But I used to intentionally, know I was going to travel at least like once a month or, once every couple of weeks. And like that was when I would do very specific types of work when I was like in transit, going through time and space through different environments. Cause for some reason it just tuned me up. So I'm curious if you have something similar or, if that just doesn't apply at all.
I don't think it really applies. The thing that is different about this is one, just the mental relief. So life back in Iowa is normal. So we have a lot of obligations. There's always something to be done, especially on the weeknights, and here we have no obligations. Outside of going to church on Sunday, there's nothing. If it were a little bit warmer, we might have a routine where after dinner we just go for a walk. And that's something we don't get to do in Iowa at this time of the year because it's so cold. You don't want to go outside. And the other thing is just it's tough to be on top of each other in a smaller house without all of the things that you have. And even right now, my daughter's Adeline is struggling with sleep because she's adjusting. So it's been tough on Mandy to actually enjoy this as much. But the fact is like something is happening to her too, where she is growing in a way that necessarily wouldn't happen in Iowa, where she has the advantages of being able to go through routines, or like honestly, she could take her kid to school and be free from her for a few hours. So she's being stretched and grown in a way that is not a way that we would normally be able to do. So there's a couple different things happening, but the one thing that I remember we came away from when we left Florida last year and decided to do this again was the connection. Like we just feel so much more connected to each other because like we're literally on top of each other for almost the entire time. So that's nice. That's the number one reason that I wanted to do it again. I was like, not a lot of people have the opportunity to have a community that they can unplug from. Not that I am like trying to get away from those people. Not at all. They're great. But it's also, we can just be here and be ourselves. And we can't necessarily do that when there's other things that we have to attend to. And that's part of the process of just, for us, like with this whole, what are we fighting for? What are we building this company for? Well, it's connection. So I'm glad that I'm able to make these connections with my family that a lot of people aren't afforded the opportunity to. So being able to work remote is huge.
Absolutely. And, it's neat. Whether it's intentional or not, like the awareness you have that you are recognizing that by leaving, the area where you guys live and have like the support network that you have and the resources that you have, putting you and Mandy in a situation to where you're fully dependent upon each other to cover and move, support each other, help each other out. Like that was when Mindy and I moved to Oregon. Like that was the thing that I think really, I mean, I would say our marriage was pretty galvanized at that point, but like it really, really galvanized things. Like we knew that because the 2 years that we spent out there, we ended up having, we ended up, getting one other couple that we were close to, but, even still, like it was Mindy and I, like we had to depend on each other for everything. And we grew a lot in our relationship during that time period. And that's also where I think things started to shift for me as a father too, for a number of reasons. But yeah, being able to be remote, especially in this season that we're in with the company and the team that we have, it's good timing. It's good timing for you to be able to take advantage of that. And it may not be, we're a few decisions and a few, growth spurts away from, potentially being a season where we can't jump out quite as often, or we still could, based on design, but who knows what, we could end up having a physical space in the next, quarter, 2 quarters away. You never know, and have people and have needs where we got to be physically present. So we'll see where it goes.
One of the other things that's really cool about this is we're here for 7 weeks and everything that we're living with came in our car. So we went from a full house to a car. And most of that stuff, yeah, I mean, my son's bike was in the car. And I didn't really bring a lot. Like, I brought a couple t-shirts, some clothes, enough equipment to do a podcast, brought a couple guns, and that's about it. So you realize that you can make do with a lot less when you're doing this kind of thing. It just, again, shows you how the pursuit of things and the trappings of stuff are really that. They are trappings. They're, you know, you can get caught up in that, like making sure that your home is as comfortable as it possibly could be. You've got it kitted out the right way. You know, like you're doing all of these things in the pursuit of making it just right. I guess there's an argument for the process. That could be a process that you enjoy, but like a lot of the time that's just kind of tied up into, hey, this is going to make me happy. But this is teaching you like, no, the things that make you happy aren't the things, it's the people. So it's just, it reinforces that the bonds are what are strengthened. And, you know, if you have the accoutrement to make a really enjoyable life, well, cool. Like, do that at your home, but you don't need it. It's not necessary. I mean, right now, like, if we're able to, being out in the beach or being up at a park, that's about the number one thing that we pursue outside of a work day.
Dig it, man. No, that's beautiful. I've wanted to do something like that with us. Not for years. It's something that's been more recent. I'd probably say since maybe 3 years ago. I want to either. My wife isn't down for it, but like I would like to do like a month, like in like Newport Beach, like right by Dana Point, and there is a beach right there. I forget the name of it. It's got the one of the most consistent waves like in the world. And one of my best friends, and you know, the godfather of my eldest daughter lives out there. So I've wanted to do a month. So maybe we'll be inspired by you guys and actually pull the trigger on that. But again, back to relationships. That's a relationship that I would love to invest in more. He was one of my groomsmen, roommate, University of Texas, godfather to my eldest child. Like, you know, fantastic guy that would just be love to have him around more and have him around my kids more.
Is this where we turn the conversation to shitting all over California?
Man, I think California shits on itself. I don't think we got to help out
It's
with
funny.
that at all.
I saw an article that was like, here's where $100,000 goes the furthest, like city-wise, and here's where it goes the least. Like, here's where you're going to have to earn a ton more. And like out of the top 10 cities, I think you can guess most of the top 10 cities where you need to earn way more than $100,000 are in California. And then the ones where it stretches the furthest, Texas has like 3 or 4, maybe even 5 cities. So, I mean, I get it why all the Texans are upset about the Californians moving there. It's like, we don't want you to California or Texas, because the last thing that we want is to turn into San Francisco and all of that stuff. And I mean, California's beautiful. There's no reason why you wouldn't want to believe, or why you wouldn't want to live there if you were just looking at it from that standpoint.
Dude, I get goosebumps just thinking about the time I spent out in Laguna Beach or in San Diego, you know, or any of the other spots that I've had the privilege of getting to spend time. Dude, yeah, man, I'm getting them again, just getting chills just thinking about it. Like there's very few places that are as spectacular as California. But you know, people do what people do, and people like to mess things up. So we can just leave with that. But dude, did you see, I haven't had a chance to really dive into this myself as far as really dig into the details, but I caught a blip this week that there is somebody who is from China that's actually not a citizen of the United States. And like they were allowed to city council. Yeah.
In San Francisco. Yep.
That just baffles me. What's it? Did you get a chance to check that out? Like, is there a thought process behind
the
that?
thought process? I'm sure has everything to do with like, how can we further destabilize the United States and erase national and statewide sovereignty, even at the community level. It kind of piggybacks on that. There was like a bunch of Brett Weinstein was on Rogan, and then this was on the Epoch Times or the Epic Times, depending on how you want to pronounce it. There's all these military-age Chinese people coming over, Chinese men, military-age Chinese men coming over the border. There was a whole segment on how, like, in Panama, as a way station for their movement, they're just, like, left alone. They're encouraged to move across. Like, you know, it's so hard to think that this is not organized to, I wouldn't even say destabilize the United States, but to like totally implode the United States. Like, how could it be anything other than that? There's no, it's a clown world, and when you look at it on its face, it doesn't make sense. So if it doesn't make sense on its face, there has to be an explanation. Like in the because if you're looking at it, you're like, okay, so a Chinese citizen is part of the city council of San Francisco. How does that make sense? It doesn't. Okay, well then, the explanation must be pretty lopsided, or not lopsided, but just like,
wasn't it Eli Crane when they were asking him about the stuff that's going on up in DC, that he chalks a good portion of what's going on to just stupidity. Just like people that are naive, that aren't like actually qualified for what they're doing. So it's like how much of this is due to just people who are grossly inept and not equipped for what it is that they are now overseeing. Is that actually part of the plan? Like putting those people in those positions because they're easier to control, or they are going to make mistakes? Or, is this actually all very intentional? Like, and you and I have talked about this before, where like, I believe that it's all intentional, but I don't necessarily believe that people themselves, like there's one person who's smart enough to, and is capable enough to be moving all of this by their hand and their will. Like I believe in, something darker, bigger, that like is actually operating in the background, whether you want to say that those are demons or dark forces. Like, again, might sound a bit crazy, but I do believe in light and dark. And I do believe that there are bad things that are happening, that are trying to strip out the things that have given our nation the strength that it's had. And you hit on a minute ago, what's attack on the community, on the family.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that the ineptitude or the incompetence of people who are in positions of power across the United States is something that these dark forces that you mentioned prey upon. So, sure, you got a bunch of stooges in office, or, bureaucrats who are just simply, pencil pushers or paper pushers, and, they're just rubber stamping stuff. So there's other people who are like, that's easy to exploit. I mean, if you were in a tactical series, like that's exactly what you would do. You'd be like, where are the easiest places for us to exploit in order to gain the upper hand over our enemy? So like if it was an invasion, you'd be like, well, this is a really good place to go. This is a really good place to go. We're going to go ahead and make moves on those spots. And then these fortified positions, we'll go ahead and avoid those until we've already made it in, and then we can double back and then hit them from a side that they're not yet ready, or they're not prepared for. So that's why I don't believe that I don't think that there's just a bunch of people making bad decisions that are causing it. I think that they're being exploited for sure. And I don't know how you would argue any other way. Like, it's something that whenever people are like, why is this happening? Why is this happening? It's because evil abounds. Actually, my friends, so this is a really interesting thing. My friends just saw Jordan Peterson over the weekend. So he was gone while I was in Iowa. Pretty bummed about that. But they were like, it was a 99% good presentation. And then I asked them, like, what was the 1% that wasn't bad? Or that was bad? He doesn't have an explanation for sin. And this is always what gets me, like, when people talk about all the bad things and why are these things happening and they can never come up with an answer. It's like, it's pretty evident if you read the Bible. Like, it talks about sin. Like, it says it in Genesis 3 or whatever it is, when Cain has slain Abel and God tells Cain, like, hey, you better watch out and get a hold of sin because it is crouching at the door to basically own you. And sin is the driving force for all of this evil. It's people's inward, like their inward leaning to better their own lives at the expense of others. That kind of selfishness is what produces sin. And if you can't see that, then I guess you just don't have eyes to see that, like, evil is like what begets sin. This, again, good versus darkness, evil versus good. Sorry, mix my metaphors there. But that's what it has to come down to. And I think that when, something like this person in the city council of San Francisco, who is not a U.S. citizen, being there. Maybe she was put in there because, you know, you've got these bleeding heart liberals who are like, oh, it's a really good thing for us to take underrepresented people in our community and help them establish, like, get a voice, right? But then, like, that's an evil thing to do because you're undermining the constitutional republic of the United States, as well as like how it's administering local level government. So, you know, there's an evil intent there, even if you think you're doing the good thing. You know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. That's another way to put it. It's like you could be giving evil power without even realizing it. And that's, again, where ineptitude and incompetence aren't necessarily excuses. That's just how evil finds its way into manifesting and making its work done.
Yeah, and I'm still just at such a loss, like, because I'm sitting here trying to think of in any way that it's beneficial, like even for the people that are underrepresented based on the way that they have come to be here. I mean, I don't know. I can't come up with anything. I mean, I'm just trying to think of the other side here. Like, I mean, we've got all these people that have come here, like legally, you know, that have been able to do so through the right channels, and that's, you know, that's been, I'm sure that is also is not a perfect system, but was it so broken that like the necessary, you know, adjustment that needed to be made? I don't think so. Like, and clearly, you know, if there's people that are fleeing from their countries and they want to come to the United States and they're coming in droves, if our government really was committed to protecting the way that our country has existed, the way people have fought and died for it to exist, and the way that people are still living and making decisions in a way that would indicate that they want that to still continue to exist. And that's what we have voted for and put people in office to protect. That like they should be willing to, and there should be the resources to actually truly figure this problem out.
Yeah. I don't think that there's any problem inherent with people trying to come to the United States and make a better life for themselves.
Absolutely not. That's part of that's why we're all here.
Yep. And I don't even think there's a problem for, like, you know, like if you're desperate and you do anything that you possibly can to get into the United States, like, I get it. The problem is, like, this is a nation built on laws, and you should suffer the consequences of violating those laws. Now, what should those consequences be? Well, deportation naturally would be the number one. Like, you should just be deported. You're deported in all the other kinds of countries, so you should just be deported. The last thing that should happen is that you get set up in a hotel. You get a $5,000 gift card. You get this. You get that. You get right. So, I mean, that's where, and this is definitely something that everybody's talking about. Like, they're facilitating illegal immigration, and they're actually, that's the encouragement. And again, why? I think that there is a good possibility that there's going to be some kind of armed action against the United States population. You know, the ATF is really good at losing guns. Who's to say they didn't just lose a couple million guns? And, you know, we've got all of these people here who are completely undocumented. And, you know, we're going to be talking to Matt Murphy here in a little bit. There's 84,000 children who have been lost in the past couple of years coming over. So Matt with the Sentinel Foundation talks about how, you know, they're being used, those children are being used for heinous purposes, and so that's got to stop. And again, like, you're just letting them in and you're losing track of them on purpose, and there's no system here, and it's terrible. I'm just marking this clip right here. I feel like I'm struggling on this one. So
I thought it was great so far. I mean, we're not
just bobbling.
No, I thought it was good. It was good, man. I mean, it's probably at the point where, like, we probably can't really say too much about it unless we, you know
subject matter experts.
Right. But I mean, it's worth bringing up. I mean, it's relevant. It was timely. It just happened. And this would be like one of those things where, like, maybe Carson could take it and just go, and it just basically where we're just talking about it, and then it's like, hey, like, what are your thoughts on this? Like, what do you think about, someone, a Chinese national, being allowed to sit on city council when they're not an actual citizen of the United States? Like, to me, it just, I just can't. It's like it's so ridiculous that it's hard to believe that it's even happening. And that's why there's just it's one event after another that, like, checks that same box, where it's like, if you'd have told any of us this was happening like in 2016, like, we would have been like, that's not gonna happen.
I know. Like the level of lunacy is just hard to comprehend. So I think what's crazy is the Babylon Bee has been around maybe like 6 or 7 years, probably a little bit longer than that. And, when it first came out, it was Christian satire. So for most people who weren't Christian, they didn't really understand the satire because all of it was just kind of poking fun at the church. And then after a while, they started swinging at the people, like popular culture from a Christian perspective. Then maybe 2 or 3 years ago, they started Not the Bee. So I actually don't even follow the Babylon Bee. I'm not on their email list, but I've been on the Not the Bee email list. And what that is a series, like, they'll just take daily news headlines or happenings and then put it out there. And the basic thrust is, this isn't satire. It sounds like the Babylon Bee. It sounds like one of our Babylon Bee articles, but it's actually real, and it happened yesterday or earlier today or earlier this week. And every time you read it, you just cannot believe that this is real. Like, you're right. There's no way in 2016 that we would have ever thought that the kinds of headlines that we're reading right now would be possible, especially at the frequency with which they're coming out. Like, it's just probably every 15 minutes there's something that's just absolutely crazy, bananas, that is a new talking point, a new headline. I was just going to say how crazy it is that, like, we've got the White House saying that the president of the United States is not mentally fit to stand before, like, any kind of tribunal or whatever. But then again, they're going to put him on the ballot. Like, that's nuts.
Well, it's basically publicly saying that we're okay, like, running the country by proxy. Like, we're okay with, like, other people actually making the decisions for the person who's arguably supposed to be the most qualified, most effective, and most intelligent person representing, like, one of the most powerful countries in the world. Like, that just...
Which would make sense. Like, if he had a stroke a year ago and you're like, okay, we've got to figure out how to maintain until the election.
He did. I think he's actually had several strokes prior to running, which is like...
He's having a stroke right now. He has a stroke every 5 minutes, I'll bet.
There's something else I saw within the last day that was another one that, like, if someone had shown me this video in 2016, again, I'd have been like, there's no way this is happening in the United States. Maybe in some other country, but not here. Like, I was watching this video. One of my kids showed me this video of this guy who was playing basketball, like, on a high school team, like on a girls' high school team. Now, and it didn't say that whether he was transgender or anything like that. I just am assuming that he was, because he was the only guy playing on the girls' team, and he literally hurt one of the girl. Like, I think it said that he had hurt multiple girls during that game, but the video showed just one girl being hurt and not being able to get up off the floor. Like, after, he did what he did, being a stronger human being with different genetics. And I just sat there and I was like, I mean, in 2016, if that had happened, like, there's a good chance that multiple men present in the room would have absolutely stormed that basketball court.
Yeah, I just don't know why that doesn't happen.
I mean,
you saw what happened. You saw what happened in Canada a couple weeks ago, right? The swimming coach.
I mean, there's a lot happens in Canada.
That place is lost.
What are you referencing?
So this 53-year-old man identified as a 15-year-old girl went into the girls' changing room with all the team, changed with the team, and then went and swam with them.
I think didn't even all the parents, like, I think one of the things I've read was all the parents actually even went into, or this was another event like this, but the parents went in and built little towel like areas so that the dude couldn't see like their daughters. And I'm like,
Why not just push him out of the locker room and say you can't do this? Like, why in the world would you try and take protectionary measures in that way as opposed to just removing the ostensible threat?
well, and you wouldn't, in that scenario, like, you wouldn't even have to like put a beat down on the guy. Like, he's 53. Just don't let him in. Like, just say, sorry, like, you are not physically capable of going by me. Therefore, you are not going by me. Like,
That's such a Canadian thing. Sorry, you can't come in here. Sorry. No, not sorry. Like, get the hell out of here.
I love the Canadian accent. I love sorry,
sorry.
and a boat.
Yeah.
All of that. Like, it's fantastic. I've actually got a lot of people in Canada that I'm friends with that I actually absolutely adore. Man, some of them actually have or are trying, and some of them are, holding it down up there. And, I don't know if they're fighting the good fight or what they're doing, but no, man, like, yeah, it just blows me away. Like,
which is again why these conversations have to keep happening, because like if we sit here and don't have a podcast where we talk about the lunacy and we talk about something else, if we talk about superficial things or even things that are related to business and don't really talk about what's going on in culture, then that stuff is allowed to thrive. So the encouragement that I have for anybody listening to this is like, take these conversations and actually have dialogue with people who are on that side if possible. Yeah. Like, I know that they're
peaceful
not very
dialogue.
capable. People on that side aren't that capable of it. They usually tend to resort to ad hominem attacks or whatever. But, if possible, engage, because like the thing about their arguments is they're fallacious at their core. So it's very easy to expose the fallacy. But the problem then again is like the groupthink and, how they just can't get away from believing what they believe. That's the sad part. But at least you can talk to them.
Well, and the other sad part is that like there isn't a willingness for actual real rational conversation around this. It everything that I've witnessed, it turns to attacks, like character attacks very quickly, and like, escalated yelling and shouting, and just nothing that's conducive to people actually sitting down and like having a good discussion around this. But it might not be possible to have a good discussion.
I think there's some things that you can hold with an open hand, and some things that you can have closed hand. Like, so closed hand issues would be, this would be for me, right? A closed hand issue would be, I believe abortion is the murder of a human person. Okay. So, somebody else might not be able to have that conversation, but some of the more open-handed issues could be, like, I'm trying to think, taxation, right? So, that's an open-handed issue. I believe taxation is good for roads. I believe taxation is theft. I believe taxation should be a net positive for people who are disadvantaged and blah, blah, blah. Like, you can have a discussion around that, and I think that everybody could come away with, like, relative, like, good feelings about the role or the movement of the discussion. Whereas, like, you see a lot of these things where it's pro-life, pro-choice, and they're arguing, and nobody really, maybe not nobody, but a lot of the times it's like nobody wants to hear either side of it. And those are the tougher conversations, but those are the ones that need to be had even more than just the less nuanced conversations of general themes or topics.
Yeah. I mean, from watching with my own kids, they're actually pretty open to dialogue. My oldest sometimes will get a little flustered if there's an opinion different than her own, but she's still willing to have conversation around it. You just tell she gets really flustered. But like, when I think back when I was at the University of Texas, and and I was a conservative Christian and a very liberal, and not, I wouldn't say, I don't know if I wouldn't know if I ever felt like it was hostile towards Christianity. I mean, I guess it was. Because there was this guy, Cliff, that came onto campus, and man, like, there was a group that always came out to meet him. It was very adversarial. He did a good job of de-escalating things and keeping conversations very rational for the most part. Of course, there was some times where it wasn't able to be there, but I just think back like on during that time period where like that was part of going to university or going to college was to have your ideas challenged. Like to like that was the point. Like you were supposed to get stripped down and basically put into a situation to pressure test like the things that you grew up believing and thinking and doing and being given the opportunity to reassess that based on having other things brought into your world. And when I look now at like what's going on, at least what's visible, like you see people like Jordan Peterson going on to campuses, and I mean, it seems not, I mean, I'm not gonna say all the time, but it seems quite frequently like he's not even allowed to actually ever speak. Like they blow air horns and they scream and they yell and they like, bring other things in there to make a lot of noise and racket. And it's like, if there was somebody out there that like, you just would think that there would be somebody capable on that campus to stand their ground and like have like actual intelligent like conversation like with him. And so that's where I guess where I've started getting really scared is with with our youth, like if they're so incapable and if that's real, if that's actually truly real, like they can't tell the difference between facts and what aren't facts, and they are not capable of having these types of conversations. And maybe it's because like it tears down, it cuts down to such an identity level thing. So a lot of this, I think a lot of the anger that gets directed at Jordan Peterson like is from the transgender community, and maybe because it is such a deep, your identity, like who you are at your core, when somebody is arguing, not against you as a person, but like, against decisions that you've made or you are making or you are supporting being made for other people. I mean, is it possible to like really have rational conversation? Like if it's something that's like just that deeply ingrained in you, like it's your identity, like, same thing as your sexuality, or, it is your sexuality.
Yeah. I think those are confused people. I can't remember the name of the physician, but gosh, is it Dr. Deborah So? I think it is. She's a sex researcher who specifically studies like transgenderism as well as like the modern sexual movement. And through her research, she has been able to determine that a lot of the people who suffer from transgender or gender dysphoria are typically autistic. So an autistic person has a really hard time self-identifying, self-expressing, self-regulating. And so that's one thing that like the movement towards transgenderism is facilitating, is saying, hey, look, like you don't feel right in your mind. You don't feel right in your body. You know why? It's probably because you're not in the right body. That's probably the reason for all of your confusion. So that's why they're quick to migrate towards this way of thinking. And if you think about it, like part of the reason that the transgender movement is growing so rapidly is because the level of autism is growing so rapidly. And I think we can see that that's only going to get worse because the vaccine schedule is increasing. And of course, people are going to be like, there is no provable link between autism and vaccines. And that's patently false. You can look at so much of the research. You can look at the vaccine courts and the payouts and the billions of dollars showing that like vaccines have been proven to cause all kinds of genetic mutations, and autism is certainly an expression of those mutations. So that's where the identity part comes in. Like if you are having a really hard time navigating the world and you're confused about who you are because of underlying genetic issues or mental, let's just call it a mental defect, because that's essentially what autism is. Like your brain is not firing correctly at all times. Then yeah, it's very easy for you to all of a sudden get into a place in your head where like your identity as a transgender or a whatever like this is where the LGBTQIA plus is really working, because it's like, hey, I can just start to group myself into any category that I want. And part of the reason this is just occurring to me now, like the reason that particular community has such a hard time, or could have such a hard time dealing with logic when it comes to basic biology, is because like if you're autistic, like you get really stuck on one thing as it is. Like, autistic people like to clean stuff, or they like to do this, like whatever their tism is. That could be a really good reason why they can't actually have arguments, or they can't have discussions, I should say, around the matters, because like their tism is making it so that they really are incapable of having discussions, because they need special handling and all that kind of stuff. And that's just like, that's not being insensitive. It's where we're at in society. So that's where we should start to investigate tons of other things about how to minimize the risk of autism, reduce the vaccine schedule, watch out for environmental pollution. It's like, geez, it's nuts how much is contributing to it, but I digress.
Yeah, it would be interesting to bring somebody on that really could actually speak to that, or just, provide more information. That would be a really good conversation to have.
Yeah, I agree.
Dude, I'm in the process of getting my split AC thing going over here.
Oh, nice.
And those things are not cheap.
No, they're like $2,500.
Yeah, it's like 2,500. I gotta get somebody to come out here and like.
I don't think you need one that big for that room.
No, it's not. It's not big. It's just, I guess it's just, all that goes into like setting it up. I mean, I think they gotta put a hole in the wall and set up an internal unit, and then they sit upside. And then I gotta get an electrician out here to like put a 220 outlet in. Apparently, I gotta have a 220 outlet, which is like, okay, cool. Like, it's starting to heat up in Texas, and I'm like, we're gonna be podcasting a lot, and I can't be blasting that wall unit that I've had in my office. So
I put in my 7,500 watt electrical heater in my garage, and just getting the 220 wired up was $900, and my heater was $250. So yeah, the 220 is the expensive part.